Smoke covered the sky like a dirty blanket and the sun looked weak and sick through the ash. The alien world was burning, not in one place but in many, long lines of fire crawling over dry hills. Whole cities coughing out black columns that rose and joined each other until the heavens turned the color of bruised metal. The air tasted like old coins and bitter dust, and every window showed fear reflected in it. He stood on a cracked balcony and watched evacuation drones drag tangled power cables. Like tired snakes, he watched rescue crews in pale armor pull children from broken stairwells. He watched the old ones sit on steps with their hands pressed to their chests as if trying to keep their hearts from leaving. And he told himself not to cry because he was a leader. He was supposed to be strong. But the ground shook again, a slow, deep shiver from far away where the enemy machines were walking. And the balcony wall left a thin gray line on his sleeve where fresh ash had settled. Below him the plaza was full of families, bags tight to their bodies, eyes wide, voices small, some praying to old river gods, some whispering numbers and names so they would not forget, some holding tiny glowing stones that were supposed to bring luck. But the stones were dim now, almost dead, and luck felt like a story for a world that no longer existed. Inside the command hall the lights flickered, first steady, then skipping like a heartbeat, and his advisors argued in quick, sharp words. One, saying they should run to the mountain caverns because the bedrock could survive orbital strikes. Another saying the caverns would become a tomb if the enemy used fire gas. Another saying the plains to the west were still open enough for a mass launch if they could get the old space elevator powered for one last climb. But the space elevator was a black tooth on the horizon and the enemy had chewed most of it already, and the cables hung down like cut hair and swung in the wind that smelled of engine heat and fear. He moved past the map table where a white line showed the enemy advance, slow but certain, like cold water rising in a room, and a blue circle showed what was left of their own forces, small as a thumbprint, shrinking whenever the operators updated the feed. He heard the small beeping voice of the distress system waiting to be told where to scream, and he said start transmission, start it now, and the hall quieted the way a forest goes quiet before a storm. He stood in front of the old lens, the one they had not used in 100 years because they had believed the galaxy was kind or at least distant. The lens was cracked at the edges and flecked with ash, and he could see his own reflection in it and he did not like what he saw. A face lined by long nights, eyes red from smoke and from staring too long at casualty charts, a mouth that had forgotten how to laugh. He took a breath and thought of the schools they had built along the river, the glass bridges, the orchards, the songs in the spring, all the little good things that made a world feel like home. And then he spoke in a voice low and steady, not shouting, because shouting felt like giving in to fire. This is Auriga Prime, he said, his tongue stumbling on the old name that meant bright shepherd in a language no one used anymore. We are under attack by a force we cannot stop. We request aid, any aid. We request mercy from any who can hear. Our cities are falling. Our people are dying. Our children are afraid. The lens burned a tiny star into the air as the signal formed, a dense needle of meaning wrapped in mathematics and hope, and the operators pushed it into every channel they had, standard hyperwave, deep echo bounce, folded light relay, even the old pilgrim band that no one used except forgotten stations with rusted antennas. The signal ran. It jumped like a fish through currents of radiation. It slid through dust rivers between stars. It wore a skin of numbers so other minds could understand it. On the plaza below a mother lifted a child so the child could see the sky and told the child that help would come because help always came in the old stories. Because the universe had heroes hidden in it like seeds in dry ground. Because people in far places kept their hands open. And the child asked, what if no one hears us? And the mother did not answer. She pressed her mouth to the child's head and tasted ash that felt like sand between her teeth. In the alleys behind the temple, workers with burned gloves tried to unclog a water main using a tool that was never meant for fighting fires this big. Steam rose when the first water came, hot and useless, and they still cheered because anything that moved in the right direction made them feel less helpless for a breath. Across the river, a hospital dome glowed with red strips that meant full, and the overflow tents leaned against each other like tired friends. Nurses with silver eyes reassured strangers, with voices that were steady even when their hands trembled. In the command hall the map table beeped again and the white line jerked forward. The enemy had cracked the shield over the industrial quarter, a hungry grin opening across the city's side. There were arguments about launching the last 6 interceptors. Someone said keep them for escort when help comes. Someone else said send them to die now so a few more can run. And he wanted to scream at the geometry of it. Triangles and circles of Loss, numbers that looked clean on the screen but were messy when you walked among them. He touched the lens with 2 fingers. It was warm like a fever, and he whispered to it even after the official message had been sent. He whispered the things he could not say in the formal voice. Please, please, whoever you are, we are small, we are not soldiers, we grow fruit and carve stone and sing in the spring. We can pay you with work, with friendship, with stories. We can learn your names and cook. You our food and build you bridges and share our salt. Only do not let us burn down to a memory. The lens did not answer. It only hummed with the rhythm of the engine that gnawed space into a narrow road for the signal to run along. Time slowed the way it does when you are waiting for news you cannot bear to hear. A minute stretched enough for him to notice the detail of a crack in the floor shaped like a river map, to notice the way smoke moved in soft muscles near the ceiling, to notice the way an old soldier folded and unfolded her hands, a little prayer without words. Below, the plaza crowd drifted around the statue of the first river engineer. The bronze face calm and clean despite the soot. Someone had tied a strip of blue cloth around its arm. The color of the river when it was happy, and children pressed their palms to the bronze foot for luck. He went to the balcony again because he needed sky. Because inside walls began to feel like coffins when the air got thick. He thought of the enemy. He had never seen their true faces. Only their machines. Tall walkers with legs like jointed pipes. Low tanks that stroked the ground with roaming arcs of heat. Drones that buzzed in clouds and left tapping sounds on roofs like nervous rain. Every time they took a district, the maps filled with straight angles, squares of control, as if they hated curves and soft edges, as if they wanted the world to be a hard box with no room for singing. He heard a child laugh below and looked down. A small laugh, high and thin, a laugh that sounded like a bird on a winter morning. And he swallowed. It made him angry because the world should make space for that sound. Even now, especially now, the operators called him back in. A reply had come through but not the kind they wanted. A pirate relay in the outer belt offered rescue for a price that was a lie. They always asked for things you could not really give. 10,000 bodies for medical research. 5 museums emptied as collateral. Ugly words wearing clean clothes. He said ignore. And a junior officer wiped his eyes and nodded too fast. 2 minutes later another echo returned. A ghost of their own message bouncing off something dead and old. A station with no people. Only a tired transmitter still doing what it was told a century ago. The room was silent. Even the loud ones had run out of noise. He wondered if hope had a sound when it broke. If it made a chime like glass or if it just stopped and left you in a room with your own breath. A quake rolled under the city. Dust leaped off beams. Hairline cracks became honest. And in that small chaos a courier arrived with a data plate covered in ash. The courier's mask was scratched, eyes rimmed red. She said the East Line is gone. The river bridges are down. The enemy is building nests in the train yards. Nests was the right word. The machines were laying down hex plates like insect combs. Building little kingdoms for their hunger. He told her thank you. And he hated that he had learned how to make thank you sound like a funeral scarf. The signal kept moving between the stars. It reached a listening post run by merchant strangers with soft fur and shy eyes who copied it and sent it on. Their station trembled when a trade ship turned too close. And they looked at each other and touched hands in a circle and said a small prayer not for the strangers but for all voices that asked for help. Because they had asked before and remembered what it felt like. The signal passed an old wreck with a garden growing inside, bright leaves under glass. No ears to hear it. Past a patrol of quiet hunters who watched it on a screen and did nothing because orders were iron for them. It passed a monastery where machines and monks shared the same slow breath. And a young monk in copper robes copied the message and slid it into a vault labeled sorrow. And still it went. Back on the world. The night came finally. Not because the fires were less but because the ash cloud thickened until even the firelight looked tired. He stood beside the lens and the lens made a soft frost of blue on his skin. He rested his forehead against the cold metal edge and let his eyes close and saw spring again. The river lifting thin green threads where new plants reached. The market full of sour bread smell and bright paper kites fighting low wind. Songs that were just lists of flowers but made you want to dance anyway. He told himself that if help came he would keep a promise to remember every name of the lost and to plant a tree for each. He said these quiet vows inside because he did not know if he would live to plant them aloud. A young technician tugged his sleeve and pointed at a little light on the side panel. A new spike on the spectrum where there had been only noise before. It might be a reply or it might be a storm. But it rose again, a second time, then a third, steady as footsteps. He felt his heart go tight. The room leaned toward the lens, everyone leaning with it. as if they could push their will through metal. And across the plaza, the mother with the child knew nothing of spectrum spikes or lens panels. She only felt a change in the air, a change hard to name, like the moment before rain when the world pulls a cool blanket over its heat. She lifted the child again, higher this time, and said, "Do you feel it? Do you feel that?" And the child nodded without knowing why. In the command hall the spike became a shape. The shape became a pattern. The pattern held the stamp of minds that were not theirs. Minds used to hard gravity and sharp heat. Minds that did not fear edges. The operators spoke too fast. Numbers fell like stones. Translations tried to open. He whispered, "Let it be mercy. Let it be mercy," and listened while the room filled with a voice that was not one voice but many braided together. The voice did not sound kind and it did not sound cruel. It sounded like iron that had learned to speak. It said their world's name, perfectly, and said message received. And the air in the hall tasted suddenly clean, even with all the smoke, because at last there was an answer, not safety, not yet, but an answer. He put both hands on the edge of the table and bent his head and felt a small tremor of relief move through him like water finding a dry root. Outside the plaza crowd began to murmur in a new way. Not the low hopeless murmur of waiting for a door to open that never opens, but the murmur of feet shifting as people decide to stand a little straighter. And on the horizon where the space elevator's dead tooth bit the sky, a new light started to grow, small at first, like a star seen through fog, then larger, like a ship lamp, then larger still, like a wound in the night beginning to shine. He did not know who had answered. He did not know what price they would ask. He only knew that the universe had heard them and turned its face toward them. And for the first time in a long day he let himself believe that morning might still exist somewhere beyond the smoke. The night sky above the ruined city looked like broken glass scattered over black water, sparks of fire still crawling through the ash clouds and small flares rising whenever enemy machines struck something that still lived. The people who had not yet given up clung to the sound of the distress call, whispering again and again that it had gone out, that someone had heard, but no one knew if it was a promise or a lie. In the command hall the leaders stood around the glowing map, the white line of enemy advance pushing closer every hour. Some whispered that the message they received, the short one, message received, could have come from anyone, a trick, a trap, maybe even the enemy itself mocking them. But the technician swore the frequency was different. Heavy, layered, the kind of signal that burned straight through interference, and one of the older soldiers said she had heard something like it before when she was young and rumors moved through the black markets about a people from a death world, humans, creatures who lived where storms never stopped, where predators stalked every forest, where the very air seemed to try and kill them. The room went quiet at that word, humans. Because it was one of those myths you whispered but never saw, a story that made the hair on the back of your neck rise. Yet the spike on the spectrum kept repeating steady as a drum. In the plaza below, families sat together around dim lamps, children clinging to the knees of their elders, and one boy asked his grandfather what humans were. The old man told him slowly that humans were said to be born from a world where lightning struck the seas each hour, where beasts with teeth the size of swords hunted at night, where only those who were stronger than fear could survive, and the boy asked if that meant they would save them, and the old man did not answer. He just stared at the dark line of the horizon where the ash clouds glowed faintly red. Across the river, alien soldiers with scorched armor tried to dig a new trench line. But their hands shook too much, their guns too light. They kept looking up at the sky, waiting for shapes that were not yet there. In the command hall the technicians strained their ears as the voice came again, clearer now, layered with steel. A voice that spoke their name with sharp precision, then said, "We are coming, only that, nothing more," and the words rolled through the room like thunder. Some wept, some gasped. One advisor said they should prepare gifts. Another said they should prepare to flee. But the leader stood silent, staring at the stars, knowing that whatever was on the way, it was not mercy in the form they imagined. It was something heavier, something the universe itself feared. And as dawn tried to creep through the smoke, the first unnatural lights appeared high above. Small sparks at first, then long streaks, silent as knives cutting across the heavens. The people on the ground looked up with hope trembling in their eyes, unaware that they were about to learn what it meant when Deathworlders answered a cry for help. Ash still drifted down like grey snow and the city groaned with the sound of collapsing towers. The people gathered in every open plaza with their eyes fixed on the strange streaks of light cutting across the dark sky. At first they thought it might be more enemy fire, more burning steel falling to finish what the machines had started. but the patterns were too straight, too sharp, like blades sliding into place. In the command hall the technicians shouted numbers as the sensors struggled to read the signatures. The lines were vast, layered, carrying energy that shook the instruments. The leader stood frozen, his breath held, and whispered that the humans had come. Though he had never seen them before, the stories from old traders were clear. Their ships carried a weight unlike anything else in the stars. One advisor begged to send another message to welcome them, to plead for restraint. But the old soldier shook her head and said nothing you say to them will change what they choose to do. She had seen the aftermath of a human skirmish once in her youth. An entire pirate fleet. Reduced to dust within hours, the survivors said they never saw the faces of their attackers, only shadows in armor moving with the silence of hunters. Below, the families clutched their children tighter, some prayed, some sang the old river songs, their voices thin and cracked, trying to convince themselves that the light above meant salvation. But fear grew in their throats because the ships now became clear, massive silhouettes blotting out the stars, angular hulls blacker than space itself, engines glowing blue like ghost fire. The air itself seemed to hum as their presence pushed against gravity. The first of the warships slowed, and the clouds split as if cut open by an invisible blade. The alien world shook, windows shattered, towers crumbled as the sheer pressure of their entry rolled like a storm across the land. People screamed, some in terror, some in awe, and then silence fell, a silence so deep it pressed into bone. Every gaze lifted to the ships that now filled the sky. Like a second continent hanging above their heads, in the command hall the leader forced his voice steady, telling his people that help had arrived. But inside his chest his heart twisted because he could see no kindness in the shapes above, only hard power. Machines built by a species that had learned to survive by crushing everything that stood in their way. One of the younger advisors whispered that perhaps this was worse than the enemy they already faced. And no one argued, yet no one turned away, because death already sat at their doors and these newcomers at least were not yet tearing them apart. The map table flickered, showing the enemy advance slowing, not because they chose to but because they were reacting to the arrival of the fleet. Their machines paused as if sensing a predator, the white lines stuttering on the map, fear traveling even through their coded circuits. In the streets below, the children pointed up at the ships, their small hands shaking, their mothers telling them it was hope, even while their own eyes showed doubt. Then the sound came, a deep thrum like the heartbeat of a giant, rolling from the bellies of the warships, steady and merciless, a warning to anyone listening, and the first transmission broke through the air, not a plea, not a greeting, just 3 words spoken in a voice of iron, stand by ground. The words echoed across every channel, into every ear, and the alien people felt their skin crawl as if the very world itself had spoken. The leader gripped the table hard, staring up at the cold horizon, and realized the truth that hope and fear had become the same thing, because humanity had answered, and nothing would ever be the same again. The air trembled as the human fleet held its position above the alien world, a wall of black steel and burning engines casting shadows across continents. The people below stared with open mouths, some sinking to their knees in awe, others covering their faces in terror, because the ships were not beautiful. They were not graceful, they were brutal, sharp, built for one purpose only, and that purpose was war. In the command hall the leader felt sweat on his neck even though the room was cold. The technicians whispered that the fleet was bigger than anything their world had ever seen. Bigger than the invaders' machines. Bigger than all the pirate swarms that haunted the trade routes. It was a force that could swallow a system whole. And the old soldier's voice cracked as she said that the myths had been true, the Deathworlders had come. Their warships were city-sized, their hulls thick with scars, some glowing with blue shields, some bristling with weapon ports, each one a floating mountain, and behind them more shapes arrived, carriers, escorts, silent hunters that flickered in and out of cloak like predators testing the wind. The alien citizens could feel it in their bones, the way the ground itself seemed to hum, windows rattling, lamps flickering, the sky groaning as if it did not want to carry such weight. Children cried, not from pain but from the strange heaviness pressing down. Their mothers whispered that it was power, that this was what saviors looked like, but their voices shook, unsure if they believed their own words. Then the first human transmission rolled again through the atmosphere, not in their own language but translated perfectly, stand clear. Just those 2 words, repeated 3 times. The enemy must have heard it too because on the map table the white lines of their advance stopped, machines froze mid-stride, Drones hovered in the air as if waiting. Even the invaders seemed to hesitate. And then the humans moved, slow at first, their fleets spreading across the orbit. Each warship sliding into position with a precision that looked more like choreography than battle, engines flaring, hulls gleaming with the reflection of burning cities below, and then, without warning, the clouds above the eastern ridge split open with fire, lances of blue-white energy, rained down from orbit, tearing the enemy nests apart. The ground shook so hard that buildings collapsed even in safe zones. Thunder louder than anything the aliens had ever heard cracked across valleys. And where the beams touched, the enemy was no more, metal bodies shattered, walkers split in half, entire formations erased in seconds. The alien soldiers in the trenches cried out, some cheering, some covering their helmets, because they had never seen such destruction delivered so effortlessly. In the plaza, children clung to their parents as towers of flame rose where the invaders had stood. The sky flashing again and again like the world was ending. Yet through the terror ran a thread of awe, because for the first time since the war began the enemy was burning, not them. The humans did not stop after one strike. More ships tilted their hulls. More energy beams carved through the night, and the enemy lines on the map shrank, shrinking faster than the technicians could mark. Yet in the command hall the leader could not celebrate. He knew this was no gift freely given, no kindness. This was a demonstration. A statement of what it meant when humans came. His hands shook as he whispered that they had not been saved, they had been claimed. But he said nothing to his people, not yet. Because in the streets they were cheering through tears and fear, calling the humans their guardians. Unaware that guardians could also be conquerors, the old soldier watched silently, her eyes on the black fleet above, and she muttered that the real war had only just begun. And the leader knew she was right, because the enemy was not the only danger anymore. The true danger was the saviors who had answered their desperate cry. The alien world shook under the weight of what the humans had unleashed. The sky was a battlefield lit by streaks of blue fire. The ground cracked with shockwaves that rolled through valleys and rivers. Cities already scarred by invasion now trembled as if the very bones of the planet were being broken. Yet for the first time in weeks the invaders were not advancing. Their machines stumbled. Their drones fell from the air like dead insects, and their massive walkers, once thought unstoppable, were torn apart by precise strikes from above. The people gathered in plazas and rooftops, staring at the sky with wide eyes, cheering even as the air pressed against their lungs. Some cried out in joy that salvation had come. Others whispered in fear because the humans did not fight like rescuers. They fought like executioners. In the command hall the map table pulsed with frantic updates. Enemy positions vanishing in clusters of red. Technicians shouted numbers they barely believed. Whole battalions erased in minutes, and the leader's advisors clashed, one urging him to send a message of gratitude, another warning him not to speak until the humans demanded it, because every word could be judged as weakness or insolence. The old soldier leaned close and said that humans were not here for thanks. They were here because death had called to them, and death was the only language they respected. Outside the city walls alien soldiers who had fought for weeks with failing weapons dropped their rifles to the ground. Staring at the sudden silence where once enemy fire had screamed, some fell to their knees in relief. Others trembled as they realized that their lives now belonged to powers they could not control, and far above, the human fleet spread wider, black wings covering the stars. Carriers opened and released smaller craft that darted down like hunting birds, silent except for the roar of their engines as they sliced through smoke. The first of them touched ground in the industrial quarter. Massive armored transports that cracked the streets under their weight. Hatches opened, and figures emerged, tall and broad, wrapped in armor so thick it gleamed like stone. Their visors glowed pale. In the haze, they moved with the calm speed of predators who had never known fear. Alien civilians hiding in ruins saw them first, saw the way their steps shook the broken pavement, and a whisper spread like fire. Deathworlders. The myths are true. These are them. In the command hall the leader watched the first images come through the sensors, his breath tightening because the humans were even more terrifying in motion than in legend. One of the armored figures raised a hand, a gesture, and the fleet above answered with another strike, coordinated, precise, erasing the last enemy positions near the river. The people in the plazas erupted in cheers, thinking this meant freedom. But the leader felt only dread, because he saw how the humans fought, with no hesitation, no pause, no mercy. They fought like they were not saving a world but cleansing it. And he wondered if when the last invader was gone the humans would look at his people and see weakness, and if weakness in their eyes deserved the same fire they had given the enemy. The old soldier whispered beside him that they had traded one terror for another, and he closed his eyes because he knew she spoke the truth. The desperate cry had been answered, but what had arrived was not salvation, it was judgment, and his people would have to live with whatever that judgment meant. The city still smoldered, streets cracked open like old wounds, towers leaning half-dead against the night sky, but the invaders who had once marched through every block were gone, their hulking machines broken into twisted heaps of metal, their drones shattered like glass across the rooftops. The people gathered in the plazas could not believe it. They whispered to each other that the nightmare was ending. Yet none of them cheered too loud because the warships still hung above, black shadows covering the stars, watching everything like predators circling prey. In the command hall the leader stood stiff, his throat dry as the technicians reported that the enemy was retreating, pulling back from the southern ridges, abandoning the rail yards, the red lines on the map vanishing one by one. The advisors clapped and wept, some saying they should run to meet the humans, kneel before them, thank them. But the old soldier's voice cut through, cold as iron, saying you do not kneel to Deathworlders, you endure them, you survive them. You pray they do not find a reason to turn their fire on you. Her words silenced the room because everyone had seen the way humans fought. Not with hesitation, not with mercy, they had reduced whole districts of invaders in seconds, no wasted movement, no wasted time. It was not a rescue, it was a purge. Outside, the first alien survivors began creeping toward the armored human transports that now stood like black fortresses in the streets. The humans had landed in perfect lines, every step measured, their armor thick and faceless, their weapons humming with restrained energy. They did not speak, they only moved, clearing debris with ease, scanning with glowing visors. One alien child slipped from her mother's grasp and ran toward them, tiny hands raised in hope. The mother screamed, but before the child could reach the soldiers, a human raised a single hand and the child froze. Not because of force, but because of the pressure in the air, the sheer weight of their presence. Then another human soldier stepped forward, crouched, and dropped a ration pack on the ground before the child. No words, no gesture of comfort. Just a gift as cold and efficient as their war. The child took it, trembling, while the humans turned back to their formation, as if nothing had happened. In the command hall the leader saw the feed and his stomach tightened. He knew this was not kindness, it was a statement. That humans gave what they wanted to give, when they wanted to, and no one else had a choice. Whispers spread across the city, some calling the humans saviors, some calling them conquerors, and in the temples prayers grew louder, begging the old gods to shield them not from the invaders but from their new guardians. In the map table the technicians confirmed it. The enemy had broken, their last nests crumbling, their signals fading. Victory was here. But the leader could not smile. He felt the silence of the fleet above pressing harder than any enemy machine had. He remembered the words from the transmission, "Stand by ground," and he wondered if those words were an order or a warning. The old soldier leaned on the table, her scarred hand steady, and said softly that they had been answered, but answers from Deathworlders were never free. He nodded, his voice heavy as stone, and told his advisors to prepare, because this was not the end of war, it was the beginning of something far greater. And as he spoke the warships above shifted again, opening like great iron flowers, and the stars disappeared completely, leaving the world in the shadow of humanity. The world lay quiet in a way it had not for months. No shrieking enemy drones, no thundering metal walkers, only the low hum of human warships filling the sky like a second horizon. The alien people gathered in the streets, dazed, whispering to each other that they had survived. Yet their voices shook because survival now depended on the giants who stood among them. Armored soldiers with faceless helmets and weapons that hummed like caged storms. The humans moved in silence, squads spreading through ruined districts with the precision of hunters. They cleared rubble with machines that worked faster than 100 hands. They set up towers that pulsed with blue light. No one knew if those towers were shields or weapons, and no one dared ask. In the command hall the leader watched the feeds in uneasy silence. His advisors celebrated, saying the humans were building defenses for them. But the old soldier only narrowed her eyes and said that predators mark territory the same way. Her words settled into the room like ash, making every cheer sound hollow. Outside, alien soldiers, who had fought desperately for weeks, laid down their broken rifles at the feet of the humans, hoping to show loyalty. But the Deathworlders did not even look down. They simply marched past, their glowing visors sweeping the streets as if cataloguing every face. One human paused at the steps of the old temple, turning his helmet slowly toward the crowd kneeling there. Mothers clutching children, elders bowing their heads. Then without a word he turned and left, leaving the aliens trembling. Unsure if their prayers had been heard or ignored, in the plaza a young alien girl held the ration pack given earlier and passed it to a hungry stranger, whispering that maybe the humans cared, maybe they were protectors, but her voice was thin with doubt. In the command hall the leader pressed his palms to the table and asked himself the question none of his advisors dared speak. Had they been saved, or had they been conquered? The war was over, yes, the enemy gone, but the Black Fleet still loomed above, their shadows stretching across oceans, their engines burning holes in the sky, and everyone on the planet felt the same cold truth settling in their bones. They had called for mercy, but what had answered was power, and power never left without a price. The morning came weak and pale, sunlight struggling to break through the heavy shadow of the human fleet. Beams of light slipped between the gaps of the massive warships, but even the sun looked smaller, dimmer, as if it too bowed beneath their presence. The alien people moved through their broken streets carrying water jars, carrying children, carrying hope that wavered like a candle in wind. Their voices hushed whenever a squad of human soldiers passed. The Deathworlders walked in perfect formation, armor dark and gleaming, visors glowing like distant moons, their boots thudding against stone roads with a rhythm that felt like judgment itself. They spoke no words, they gave no smiles, yet their silence was louder than any victory song. In the command hall the leader stood before the old lens again, his reflection broken in its cracked glass, and the technicians told him that the humans were opening a channel. His breath caught in his chest because the moment had come. The message of humanity was here. The advisors crowded close, some with hope burning in their eyes, some with dread, and the old soldier simply folded her arms, her face carved in stone. The signal cracked through the air, a voice not one but many, layered, deep, like iron learning how to speak. It filled the hall until every other sound was swallowed, and it spoke in their own language as if it had always known the words. You called for help, we answered, the voice said, simple and steady. Your enemy is gone, your world is yours again. A breath of relief rippled through the hall, but the voice did not stop. Know this, when you call to Deathworlders, you summon more than mercy, you summon judgment. Remember this cost, remember this day, for it is now carved into your history. The leader's knees felt weak, his chest heavy, because the voice was not cruel but it was not kind either. It was something larger, something colder. It was truth without pity. Outside in the plazas the same voice echoed from the towers the humans had planted. Every alien heard it, mothers clutching children, fathers leaning on broken rifles, elders pressing their palms to cracked stone. The people wept, some from gratitude, some from terror, because they understood the weight of those words. The humans were not saviors, they were executioners who had chosen, for now, not to execute them. In the command hall an advisor whispered that they must offer tribute. Another said they must swear loyalty, but the leader silenced them with a raised hand, his eyes still on the sky where the warships hovered, black shapes blotting out the stars even in daylight. He knew any promise made would be meaningless unless the humans wished it to matter. They had power absolute, power that could erase his world in hours. His people's survival would not come from bargains, it would come only from obedience. The old soldier's voice cut through the quiet, low but firm. She said they had been given a lesson written in fire, that to call on Deathworlders was to invite both salvation and chains, and she warned that the chains might not be visible until it was too late. Her words hung heavy in the room, and no one dared argue. Outside the alien children asked their parents if they were safe now, and the parents lied with smiles they did not feel, saying yes, safe, because children needed dreams even when the truth was darker. The humans spoke no more after their message. Their ships remained, unmoving. Their soldiers continued their silent patrols. But the world was forever changed. The cry for mercy had been answered, and the answer had come with a price that could not yet be measured. The leader bowed his head, whispering to himself that history would not remember them as victors. It would remember them as the people who summoned Deathworlders and lived to tell of it. And outside, the shadow of the fleet stretched longer, a reminder that humanity's help was never free. It was a debt, a warning, and a lesson that would echo through the galaxy forever.